That's right.
Goodness me, that's hilarious.
Small world, isn't it? Small world.
It is.
Assalamu alaikum. Hope you well, everyone. Beautiful evening. Beautiful Tuesday evening. And we're just about to go live on air with a very important guest on a very important topic as well. So please join in and do contribute. And I know we have the England and the Scotland game, but hey, when Mr. Ali is on the radio airways, that shouldn't be any kind of competition. So please watch it on record. Watch it on record. Yes.
Yeah, I hope you appreciate I'm giving up the England.
This
is how special you are.
Oh, thank you.
I'm missing the England game.
That's a big thing, actually.
That's a big thing.
That's a big thing.
So I hope you appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. So, I think with that, we'll kick things off. We want to really get the full use of our time with the new Police Crime Commissioner. So let me kick things off. Assalamu alaikum, good evening everyone. I hope you all, it's Mr. Ali here with his Tuesday Community Wellbeing Show on Radio Aapki Awaaz. I hope you're well. I hope you're keeping fine and fital. And as always, I'd like to start off my show by sharing with you the latest coronavirus figures for Birmingham and also the inner city wards. I know I was busy last week promoting the COVID walk-in mobile unit that's been doing the rounds to the 15 super wards that have the highest numbers. And I must say that on for those of you that got yourself vaccinated, there was little or no waiting time. However, even though the walk-in at the solely adult education centre on Anthony Road was an amazing success, however, that did not fall through for the Saturday one at the Norton Hall as well. So again, I urge all and each and every one of you that if you haven't been vaccinated, please take yourselves, your family members, your neighbours, your relatives, and get yourselves vaccinated. No appointment required, no questions asked apart from verification of your details, and you will be administered the Pfizer vaccine on your doorstep. What more can the NHS do for us? So in terms of where we are, these are the latest figures. So in terms of new cases within Birmingham, 995 cases. That is an increase of 287 compared to the week previous. So peak, and 95% of the cases are of the Delta Indian variant. It is the Indian variant that is really propagating our cases on an upward trajectory. In terms of what that means per 100,000 cases, the rates of cases are 87.1. And only as little as maybe 8 weeks ago, the cases were around 22 per 100,000, and now we are 87 per 100,000 population. In terms of those wards that have the highest number of cases, a good proportion of these are in those 15 super wards, including the highest one, which is Handsworth, which has 173, followed by Birchfield, Heartlands, Moseley, Alum Rock, which has 157 cases, South Yardley, Lozells, and Small Heath as well. Now, anyone over the age of 20 can be eligible for the vaccine, and you can book that from the nhs.uk website. And in terms of where we are, we have over 45 million people in this country that have been vaccinated. However, as always, the BAME community, the Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, are the ones that are lagging about 20-25% behind the overall UK population. So if you remember, going back maybe 2 months ago now, just a couple of weeks before the Thursday, 6th of May, we had Simon Foster, who was the prospective candidate for the Labour Party for the Police and Crime Commission, came into the studios and set out his vision as to what he will do once he is elected. 48 days later, we have invited Simon once again now, and congratulations to Simon and to his team for getting that victory. However, we want to get back in and to see what has the first 48 days been like, but also how far his plan, his vision, his mandate is being actioned, because far too many lives are being lost through some more killings that we've seen over the weekend. And I don't know whether this is almost a replication of what happened in London, where during those summer solstice, those summer days, where there was a real increase in stabbings, in violent crime, and in also gun wounds and gun killings as well. And we don't want any kind of repetition here in Birmingham. But I have seen in the news, certainly, whether there's been an increase, but I've certainly seen it's a lot more prominent as well. So we're going to get straight into it. First of all, a huge warm welcome to you, Simon, for coming on a day where England are playing, Scotland are playing. It's been an amazing tournament, and the fact that you have, promised that you were going to come back soon after the elections if you were to win, and give us an update to our local listeners and our local community. So first of all, congratulations, and secondly, how has that first 48 days been like for you?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for the congratulations. As you say, I was elected as the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner on the 8th of May, and when I came to see you and speak to your listeners 2 weeks before the election, you're right, I did promise I would come back if I was successful, and sure enough, I'm here, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here this evening, notwithstanding that England are playing, and as a huge football fan, I have to say, that just shows you how important Mr. Ali's radio show is. Folks, so that's why I'm here, because Mr. Ali really counts when it comes to community radio. But yes, how's it been? It's been a whirlwind. It's been hard work, working long hours, working very hard to establish a platform for the work that I want to be doing in the next 3 years. And of course, it's important to understand I've only got a 3-year term, of course, because the elections were postponed in May 2020 and they have not rolled on the election term. So rather than getting a 4-year term, I've only got a 3-year term. So it was absolutely key to me to hit the ground running right from the very get-go. And that's why when I officially took office, which was on the 13th of May, and became the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner, I immediately launched a call for evidence to the people and communities of the West Midlands to ask them to respond about the key issues that are of concern to them, because part of my statutory duty as a Police and Crime Commissioner is to prepare a West Midlands Police and Crime Plan which sets out the needs, priorities and objectives for the policing service on behalf of the people and communities of the West Midlands. So I launched that call for evidence. That closed on the 10th of June, but in that time we've had over 300 responses from individuals and from community groups and organisations. So that's fantastic. We're collating all of that information. That's not the end of the process, because we'll now move to stage 2 of the consultation, and that's going to involve roundtable events on some of the key themes that people have been particularly concerned about, especially around violent crime, domestic abuse, violence against women and girls, for example. So we're going to be embarking on that in the next few weeks, and hopefully we're aiming to have a new West Midlands Police and Crime Plan by the end of September. In October, hopefully, and that we hope will be in place by then. So that's been a key area of work that I've been engaged in since I got elected.
So you haven't been hanging around really, have you? You've been sort of, setting up from the set blocks and sort of getting out there and trying to make a difference on the issues that are affecting the local community. And I also did notice today that you have appointed and launched your new strategic board members, and in there were a number of familiar faces such as Councillor Wasim Ali, you had Tom McNeil, you also had Councillor Bhupinder Charmaine, and also a real champion of women's rights and women issues, Councillor Nikki Brennan. So a real fantastic to all of you. And it's nice to see, for me, and that's something that I picked up by all of the representatives for the Police Crime Commissioner and also for the Metro Mayor and for many other sort of positions such as the NHS, the Commonwealth Games, that there was a lack of BAME representation at that higher level. And you have certainly done your bit in order to make sure that there's a representation. So there's a number of BAME people, but also women as well, women at that senior level. How important was that for you to have that cross-section representation at your key positions?
Mr. Ali, it was absolutely fundamental to me. It was really important to make sure that we had a team that was representative as far as possible of the people and communities of the West Midlands. That's absolutely fundamental. We've got 6 people appointed. We've got 3 men, 3 women, and as you say, we've got representatives from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic community as well within that team, and that was absolutely important to me. I mean, one of the reasons it's important, well, a couple of reasons really. One, because it's just the right thing to do. We need a team that is representative of the people and communities of the West Midlands, because it will be more effective that way. These people need to be speaking on behalf of the people and communities of the West Midlands. Absolutely fundamental, number one. Number two, they're an extremely talented team in any event, and they were great candidates, and they truly deserve being appointed from what was a competitive field, I might add. But thirdly, one of the issues I'm committed to is having a West Midlands police service that is more representative of the people and communities that it serves. That's really important, and at the moment we don't. At the moment we have a Black, Asian and minority ethnic community in the West Midlands of about 30%, and yet, for example, police officers only represent about 13% in the West Midlands, and I don't think that's good enough in 2021. So what I wanted to make sure was that it's no good me saying to the West Midlands Police, you need to be more representative of the people you serve, if I'm not also setting an example. So it was important to me from that point of view as well, because if we want a police service that is representing the communities that it serves, it is incumbent on me as a Police and Crime Commissioner to lead on that and set an example.
Yeah, and you've certainly done that. And sometimes we can sort of give the talk, but it's nice to see that you're actually following through with that. And when I was going through some of the names and the individuals there, the overwhelming sort of thing that came to me was, very talented team, cross-representative. The only thing I would say is that there would have been, for me, just to sort of make it really comprehensive, an individual there who has been working with, grassroots organizations, or at that grassroots, talking to people, helping them at the grassroots, gone through the footsteps of people that have been affected by domestic violence, by maybe the violent crime. And we were sort of talking about this off air, and you say, look, I can only deal with the applications that were presented. What's your sort of comments maybe on air really to sort of people that, that may sort of share that sort of sentiment with me then?
I think that's a very fair comment. I think somebody along the lines that you are talking about would have been a very useful addition to the team. There's no doubt about it. It was a competitive field of candidates that we had who applied for the relevant posts, and obviously we can only appoint from those people who've applied. And I must say that we did seek to advertise as widely as possible. I would say that I appreciate what you say about kind of that level of community activism, but I would say that amongst those candidates that we have, although they may not necessarily be community activists at the moment, they are, for example, elected representatives who have had experience of that, who are councillors who are embedded in their communities. Certainly Wazim Ali, for example, is truly embedded in his community in Sandwell. Bhupinder Garkal is well known and again well embedded in his communities in Wolverhampton, and of course Councillor Nikki Brennan in Sparkhill. She has an enviable reputation for what the work that she's done. With Brum Baby Bank and the campaigning and the work that she does amongst the community in Sparkhill. So I think that team does bring with it that sort of level of experience, if not simply dedicated as a community activist.
Absolutely. I think if I can, maybe for the listeners who aren't familiar with the Police Crime Commission, or what does it entail, maybe if you can just set out in a few minutes, just a bit of a background so people can sort of pose the right questions and comments to yourself.
Yeah, it's really important to explain the role of the Police and Crime Commission, because, as you say, it's not always one that's well understood amongst the wider public. I mean, I do sometimes find, of course, that it's not always one that's well understood amongst political circles either, to be honest. And it is an emerging role. I mean, it's been around since 2012, and there's been a couple of kind of full rounds of elections. This is the third time round, but I think it is a role that could be better understood. So in simple terms, it's not about operational day-to-day policing, because of course that's the responsibility of the Chief Constable. It's not about representing the police. It's about representing the people. It's about representing the people who have elected the Police and Crime Commissioner. And there are three core functions that you have as a Police and Crime Commissioner, and it is more complex than this, but in simple terms, you have the responsibility for preparing a police and crime plan that sets out the needs, priorities and objectives for the policing service in the West Midlands on behalf of the people. Number two, you set the police budget. And that includes the council tax precept, which is that part of people's council tax, your listeners' council tax, that goes towards paying for local policing. And then thirdly, you have a responsibility to hold the Chief Constable and the police service to account in the widest possible sense on behalf of the people.
Yeah, I think you gave a great summary there, Simon. And I think it's about that sort of providing that strategic leadership and sort of holding the police to account, really, and not trying to sort of do their job, day-to-day job for them. And I suppose what you've done is, during this pandemic, I suppose actually, there has been a real change in focus, shift, how things all sort of used to traditionally work. How hard has it been, or difficult has it been for you to sort of really get a grasp of what are the issues now, as opposed to maybe pre-COVID?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the last year has probably been a year like no other. Unprecedented for all of us, really. All of us, and including policing, of course. There have been many challenges for policing, but not exclusively for policing, but for many of our businesses, for many of our retailers, for many of those people in the social and leisure sector, and so on. It's been a real challenge. It certainly altered the nature of the campaign that we had to run, of course, because I mean, as you will know, normally when running a campaign across the West Midlands, before lockdown, back in March 2020, when the elections were postponed, I was spending a lot of time travelling around the West Midlands to all the 4, 5, 6, 7 corners of the West Midlands, meeting a lot of people, attending a lot of meetings. Obviously, all of that changed to a certain extent. The campaign that had to move online, really, and then obviously we ran the campaign online for many months. And then obviously as restrictions began to lift to a limited extent, we were able to get out and start door knocking and leafleting to a certain extent towards the back end of the campaign. But certainly, and it certainly changed a lot of the the nature of crime. Obviously, there were changing patterns of crime as a consequence of lockdown. I mean, two stark examples, I suppose, would be that kind of burglary. And robbery, street robbery, went down because most people weren't out as much, whereas people were in their homes, so burglary became less prevalent. But then on the other hand, we saw an increase in domestic abuse, for example. So that was an example of how two examples of the way kind of crime patterns were changing as a consequence of COVID. Absolutely,
and that's what I was trying to sort of get at, really, how things have changed. So if you want to ask any questions to the new elected Police and Crime Commissioner, please pose your questions. And I will read those out. If you want to talk to Mr. Simon Foster, then the student number is 0121 682 9735. Thank you very much, sir. And I will read out your questions just in a moment, really. But I'm going to come on to the first topic, really, if I can, which was all about the domestic violence. And we have seen, the fact that the people were on furlough, should we say, both parents or both partners were at home. under financial sort of difficulty and duress. Their children were at home if they had any. The fact that they weren't able to leave and sort of get exercise or outside. And that sort of, and not that it's an excuse, but it's just, is a real melting pot, a bit of a cooking pressure. And we have seen a massive rise in Alum Rock and, in Birmingham and West Midlands. But in Alum Rock, I was speaking to one of the inspectors early on in COVID, and he was saying it's happening. We get to find out about it because it escalates, but the local community don't. You're very good at sort of keeping a lid on it and keeping it, not sort of rise to the surface really. So it's a difficult one as well because you've got you've got children, possibly you've got financial stake between the male and the female partner as well, and sometimes the way it's done and it's manipulated, that's the norm. And the blame game is put onto the one who's the victim, and said, you provoked me, you made me do this. How important is it for us to make this a open topic? And if people are suffering, for them to be able to go to, the support, organizations out there, to the police, and reach out to help. And for those that are perpetrating, for them to stop doing it, seek help, and really put a stop to this, because, it is very cowardly. It can be solved, but the support mechanism must be there. And I know this is a key policy for you. So over to yourself, really. What more, or what will you be doing over the next 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I made it very clear during my campaign and in my manifesto that combating violence against women and girls, domestic abuse, was a key priority for me. Lots of different reasons, but certainly one of them would be because the consequences of domestic abuse can be catastrophic and devastating. They can have life-changing consequences, not only for the victim, but also for the children within the family.
Yeah.
And of course, those sorts of consequences can repeat throughout generations, and it's a really serious issue because of that.
Yeah.
So yes, I think my predecessor is the Police and Crime Commissioner, David Jameson, of course. He during lockdown did engage in some public campaigns around no excuse for abuse, for example, and also making sure that the availability of help and support was advertised in places like pharmacies and in supermarkets, where perhaps victims would be able to attend, notwithstanding they might not be going out to work, where they might be able to access help. So it was partly about making sure that people knew where to turn to get that help. I've always said that we need to make sure that the police are using all of the powers available to them in order to protect victims of domestic abuse. We need to make sure that I'm a big fan of independent domestic violence advocates. They're trained counsellors, advisors, who can provide help and support to victims of domestic abuse, helps them navigate the system. And of course that can be very challenging, particularly when you're vulnerable and have been a victim of domestic abuse, in terms of being able to access the services and the support that you're entitled to help you navigate the criminal justice system. Sure. That's really important. And I would just say I'm hoping to make a really important announcement in the next few days around independent domestic violence advocates, so watch this space. And then thirdly, we need to make sure as well, really important, that we have the right victims services available for victims of domestic abuse, so that they can access the right services at the right time. And I would just say one of the key appointments that I've made to my team is Councillor Nikki Brennan. Now, Nikki Brennan will be the first West Midlands domestic will be the first Victims Commissioner. And part of that will be focusing on domestic abuse and violence against women, not exclusively, of course, but she will be the very first Victims Commissioner in the West Midlands. So I'm very proud to have made that appointment, and I'm sure Nikki will do a fantastic job. The reason we've appointed a Victims Commissioner is, as you may or may not know, but Vera Baird, who used to be a minister in the Labour government back in the noughties, and was a Police and Crime Commissioner up in the northeast. She is now the National Victims Commissioner, and she recently published a report saying that Police and Crime Commissioners should appoint Victims Commissioners. And that's one of the reasons we've gone ahead and made that appointment in the West Midlands.
Absolutely. And you mentioned about the importance of not just focusing on the perpetrators, but also on the victims. Sometimes they can be the hidden people in all of this. And it's nice to see, someone who's able and competent and got the experience and necessary skills, such as Nikki Brennan in that role.
And I would just say as well, it's really important that we focus on, domestic prevention.
Yes.
It's really important, and that's why it's important to support the domestic violence perpetrator programs as well. So we focus on those people who are perpetrating domestic abuse, so that they can get the right help, support, education to make sure that we prevent it happening in the future. That's really important as well, of course.
I think the word education is very important here. We need to sort of, educate people and tell them what's good behaviour, what's not good behaviour. And the other thing that I was also going to touch on, Simon, was a report, was it end of last week or was it yesterday, whereby it was saying that the amount of successful convictions and or successful cases that go to court for sexual abuse or rape is absolutely abysmal. And we need to address that. So I suppose one of the questions is, how are you going to ensure that the West Midlands Police are doing everything they can to review all their sort of their processes and their touch points to make sure that the case is robust, and when it gets to the court, it has the best possible chance of having a conviction rate, rather than at the moment, which is around about 3 or 4%, and that data is national, not necessarily local, but the point is still nevertheless valid.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really key point. There's no doubt that, and it's not just in relation to rape and serious sexual offences, of course. I mean, prosecution rates have plummeted in this country in relation to all sorts of criminal offences as a consequence of the neglect, the reckless mismanagement and neglect of our criminal justice system over the past 10 years or so. I mean, I do think it's been a national shame, frankly. And at the moment, nationally, we only have overall prosecution rates at about 7%. So what that means is that of all the total recorded crime that is reported to the police, only 7% of recorded crime reported to the police actually results in any formal action via the criminal justice system. I think that's a scandal. It's not justice. And it's not safety, it's not security for people. And in relation to, I mean, you mentioned rape, it's even worse. I mean, the national average prosecution rate in relation to rape is now down to about 1.6%.
Wow,
so
incredible.
Only about 1.6% of cases of rape that are reported to the police actually end up in any formal action via the criminal justice system. So victims of rape are being badly let down. I mean, just this week, just last week, we had the government finally publishing its review into the way that the justice system has been dealing with rape. I mean, it's been much delayed. I think we're about 2 or 3 years late, and it has finally been published. The Justice Secretary Robert Buckland apologised to victims for having been badly let down. I mean, my view is they're empty words, they're rhetoric, unless they're actually backed up by firm resources that are going to change that situation, turn it round, so that victims of rape and serious sexual offences are going to get justice. And at the moment, they're not. And there are there's lots of action that we need to turn that around. I mean, partly it's about the way the criminal justice system treats victims, partly it's about resources, partly it's about the way the Crown Prosecution Service deal with these cases, partly it's about the way that victims can give evidence in court, partly it's about the level of intrusiveness around digital evidence that is often requested of victims. There's a lot we can do to improve matters.
Thank you, Simon. So I'm going to go to some of the questions and comments now. Student number is 01216829735 if you would like to speak to Simon in person. Nonetheless, I will read out your comments if you would prefer to type them out. So, walaikum salam, how are you? Okay. Good evening to your guest, Simon. Thank you. Walaikum salam. Good evening. Thank you for your time this evening. That's to yourself. Salam, Mr. Ali Saab and Simon Foster. What is the strategy regarding knife crime? We were coming on to that actually, which is spiraling out of control. So that's the next topic we're going to come to. So we'll just put that question on ice. What is Simon's policies and strategy to protect our women walking on the street? Yeah, I think we can just touch on that. By Majid, walaikum salam. Thank you, sir. Currently, the conviction for rape and sexual offences is low. What action will Simon take to improve the conviction rates? We've just touched on that, Brother Jav. So I hope that you answer. So you listened to the answer by Simon. I would encourage Simon to have a walk about in the areas such as Alum Rock once lockdown restrictions are lifted, so that he can engage and see at first hand what the issues are in local communities that elected him. Absolutely, and I will invite you alongside Mr. Ikram from Radio Awaaz, and we can take a walk down whenever the diary will allow.
That would be an absolute pleasure, and I'd be very happy to take up your listeners' invitation.
Absolutely,
in relation to that.
Great suggestion, Javed, and we will invite Simon maybe in the next month to sort of come down and have a walk around and talk about crime, talk about some of the issues on the road as well, and get to the heart of it.
I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
You.
No, absolutely. How is he going to hold the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police accountable? Will he be publishing any quarterly updates or reports? How will performance be measured? I'll allow you to answer that. Actually, it's a good question.
Yeah. The principal way in which the Chief Constable will be held to account will be via the new police and crime plan, which I talked about a little earlier in terms of the process we're going through in order to get that new police and crime plan in place, hopefully by October. That police and crime plan will set out some objectives in terms of the need, priority and objectives of the people of the West Midlands in terms of the police service that they want, number one, but it will also set out targets and measurable outcomes that we will hold the Chief Constable to account to, partly through the strategic police and crime board, partly through private accountability meetings, partly through social media, partly through scrutiny panels. All of these devices we will be using in order to hold the Chief Constable to account and the police service in order to ensure that they're meeting the needs, priorities and objectives that are set out in that new police and crime plan. Yeah,
thank you, Simon. I hope that comprehensively answers your question. Anwar Katak from BYSA. Simon, a great man and will make a real difference. Yeah, absolutely, Anwar Kata, and congratulations on securing your new home at the Awaaz Trust. I look forward for you to really be increasing the delivery and the benefit to your children.
Yeah, that's great news, by the way.
Absolutely,
I hope that it'll be possible to really transform that facility into a real community resource.
And it's at the heart of the community, linking Sparkbrook, Sparkhill, and to Small Heath as well. And it's an amazing place. So really, really excited of the stuff that will happen. And how are you going to ensure that the equalities agenda is met? For example, the population of the West Midlands need to be reflected in the West Midlands police recruitment policies. Other point is Black Lives Matter and the right to protest. Example, Kashmir. And you raised some real good points there. I'm going to maybe touch on that when we come on to that topic. I'm now going to move on to the point around, real hard violence that people are sort of seeing, not necessarily maybe experiencing, but because it's now on the news. We have 24-hour on social media. We had that young lad in King Standing knifed maybe a month ago, and there was a vigil by the local community. We've had a couple of more cases now where people have now been shot at point blank as well. This is a real crime, especially if you're a parent, if you're a young person as well, because one of the key things that we've had fed back is the reason why anyone does carry a knife is for their own protection and safety, really. Conversely, sometimes it is their own knife that is used to stab them, really. So if you can maybe just set out your broad policy, really, in terms of how you're going to sort of tackle gangs. Then obviously drug lines come into it, the county lines come into it. and also the fact that they're grooming young people to sort of be the mules and to be their drug dealers, because they're less likely to be stopped by the police, and even if they do, it's normal, it's nominal sentences that they get, and they're able to manipulate them. And at the same time, you've got knife crime, you've got gun crime. At the moment, it just seems as though it's a losing battle. People losing confidence. You talk about the conviction rates and the prosecution rates. Do you think we've lost that battle? Where do you see on this?
No, I don't think we've lost that battle. What I would say is that it's a matter of huge public concern out there, quite rightly. It's a matter of vast concern to me as the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner. I've been in office now coming up 6 weeks, but there's no time to lose. I think I said when I got elected, my election speech, my election acceptance speech, I finished that off with "there's no time to lose," because these issues need to be dealt with urgently. So, I think there's a number of different ways that we can tackle this. We're dealing with complex issues, plainly, and remember, of course, that this is not an issue that is exclusively in the West Midlands. This is an issue that affects the country as a whole. I think it's the case that in every police force in the country has seen rises in violent crime throughout the entire country, and in 4 out of 5 police forces it has at least doubled. So there is nothing exclusive about this in the West Midlands. One has to bear that in mind in terms of the context. But what I would say is that number one, and I made this one of my key campaign pledges, and of course I would emphasise that none of these in and of themselves are the solution.
Sure.
They're all part of the solution. So number one, community policing. Absolutely think that is part of the equation. That has to be part of the piece in the jigsaw puzzle here. Absolutely important, because I do think community policing can play a really important role in terms of promoting community trust and confidence, building local intelligence around a lot of these issues. It has a role in relation to being preventative, problem solving, and visible policing. I do think has a role to play in relation to this process. That's really important. Number two, in terms of youth services, absolutely key as well. We know that the cuts in policing in the last decade or so, the Home Office themselves acknowledged that played a significant role in the surge in serious youth violence and knife crime in terms of the cuts to policing. We know nationally we lost 21,000 police officers, 23,000 police staff, and the Home Office has had to acknowledge that played a role in this. Now, secondly, youth services. Absolutely key. The All-Party Parliamentary Group on Knife Crime, they found there was a strong association between those areas that had suffered the largest cuts in youth services and those that had experienced the highest rises in knife crime. Okay, and in the West Midlands, what do you find? In the West Midlands, we suffered disproportionately in terms of youth services cuts across the whole country. 82% cuts in youth services across the West Midlands. That's absolutely devastating for youth services. And of course, we start paying the price, sadly. We start paying the price. We have to rebuild youth services in the West Midlands. Thirdly, we have to deal with school exclusions, because it's so often those children who are most vulnerable to criminal exploitation, becoming victims of crime, who end up getting excluded from school. And of course, as soon as they get excluded from school, they're at risk of becoming victims of crime or criminal exploitation, particularly via county lines. And drug producers, dealers and suppliers exploiting them criminally. We need to improve statutory safeguarding, because a lot of children who are also vulnerable, perhaps those children who are care experienced, are quite often, traditionally, children's safeguarding is concentrated on risks in the home. Whereas it's not been as good at dealing with risks outside of the home. And I'm not sure the system has really adjusted sufficiently to be able to deal with those safeguarding issues outside the home. And so we need to get safeguarding of those vulnerable children right. And so often of these young children, for the lack of housing for them in local areas, they get sent away to to other areas outside of their particular area, and of course they're vulnerable then to becoming victims of crime and criminal exploitation. That's really important. I would say fourthly, we have to get the the important work that the violence reduction unit that's taking place at the moment. The Police and Crime Commissioners Violence Reduction Unit in the West Midlands. We've got 18 of these around the country, but we've got a highly effective and industrious working violence reduction unit in the West Midlands at the moment, and that is all about focusing on prevention, early intervention, addressing the underlying causes of crime, because no matter how hard the police work, no matter how good they might be, ultimately they cannot solve this problem on their own. Ultimately, we have to be able to deal with the prevention, early intervention and underlying causes of crime as well. And part of that is about youth services. Part of that is about supporting families that are vulnerable. Part of that is making sure that children aren't getting excluded from school, that they're being statutorily safeguarded, that they're being provided with diversionary activities, particularly in school holidays, for example. Absolutely key. And then I would just say finally, it's all about making sure we've got a joined up team approach to this process, because as I say, I emphasise the police ultimately can't arrest their way out of this problem. We have to have the police working with our local authorities, with the third sector, but most importantly, we have to make sure that we've got community buy-in. That's absolutely key, because none of these issues can be dealt with unless we've got the community on side, unless we've got the trust and confidence of the community, unless we're working with communities. This has to be about making sure that we are working with communities and not doing things to communities. That's absolutely key in this process, because it's only together that we're going to be able to prevent violent crime, protect young people in particular, and most importantly, of course, save lives.
That's a real sort of passionate and a comprehensive plan, really, in terms of how we're going to tackle this sort of, almost out of control issue. And if someone who, deals with young people on a daily basis, that is a real concern for them. And someone who's been a school teacher, someone who's a youth worker, someone who's got his own football club, they want to do well, they want to aspire. But unfortunately, the environment is such that it doesn't allow them to sort of, become fertile adults for the future. There has to be youth activities. I can't, stress that enough. Somewhere positive. Just in Alum Rock here, we don't have a football pitch assignment.
Right?
Yeah, we don't have a football pitch.
There's no football.
There's no community. Absolutely. So we used to have one at Rockwood. They've since the refurbishment, they've closed it down for the community use. We've got a new school by the old Smith and Nephew. They've got a football pitch, but they aren't allowing it at this moment. So when they open maybe in September, they will do. So we are having to, now when I sort of do my coaching, I have to take them to Star City or Power League. And I've got to take them by car, and I've got 3 or 4 volunteers to put them in their car. It's the amount of headache and the amount of pressure that we put ourselves in to do it happen. We have to do it. Otherwise, I know what's going to happen. They're not going to be, they're either going to be at home playing on the PS4 or they're going to be on the streets. And you know what happens on the street. They will then get groomed. They will be picked up. They will be coerced into doing stuff that they not normally would. And then there's a danger of being victims as well. And I can't stress that enough. Apprenticeships is another way. If we can sort of be, not everyone is a studious person. They're not academic. If we can give them practical work, and again, that's a real avenue. And yesterday, I know my older brother sort of gave a presentation to young people about the benefits of apprenticeships, and a lot of people weren't even aware what apprenticeships are, especially in the Asian community. They only think it's either work or university. There's no sort of middle ground. So I'm just going to sort of see
the work you've been doing around your football team, I think, is absolutely fantastic. I see it regularly on social media. It's exactly the sort of thing that can make a real difference in the community. It's exactly the sort of thing. It's about giving young people, the overwhelming majority of young people are fantastic. They're incredibly talented, they're aspirational, they want to live their best life, they've got amazing potential, and often it's just the opportunity. that is what they need. And if they don't have that opportunity, sometimes, sadly, they can end up taking, the wrong direction in life. With all the consequences that we know. I mean, I am staggered that you say there is not a football pitch that's available to the community in Alum Rock.
Staggering. So
is staggering.
So we have to go to Warden Park now.
Yeah.
And and see all we got to use.
Football is our national sport.
Yeah, we got to use cricket. I mean, it's not just sport. I mean, obviously, I'm passionate about football, but the same can be said for cricket.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a massive football and cricket fan. I played both when I was younger. I absolutely spent every available hour of my youth playing football and cricket. Absolutely loved it, and I still love it to this day. And I have to say that what that gave me in terms of opportunities, just in terms of learning life lessons, to be able to play sport. And of course, it's not going to be sport. It could be theatre. It could be music. It could be dance.
Sure.
But because sport's not necessarily for everybody. But it really does give you. I mean, it keeps you healthy, teaches you about winning and losing, teaches you about resilience, teaches you about how to deal with competition, teamwork. It has so much to offer, and I do think that if you're able to give young people those sorts of opportunities, it will really benefit and advantage them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, most definitely. And like I said, I remember we used to use our jumpers and our jackets for goalposts.
Yeah, well, same.
and now, I was hoping that by the time our next generation come through, things will be different, but unfortunately they're not. And all I would say is, there are a lot of fantastic grassroots organisations that necessarily don't have the infrastructure. And I know, you yourselves have a bit of funding. You are able to give some infrastructure and support, and maybe not look at those big organisations that have got the, the experts who are able to give the good PR and the spiel about how good they are. Go and do a bit of hard work and find out who's doing some amazing work and just let them know that if they need any support, we're here for you. And that's all I would say. And in terms of also the police as well, they also need to be far more better at promoting the fantastic work they do when they do, put someone away or get a drugs haul. Because at the moment, people do think that being a drug dealer is a crime that goes without punishment. You're not going to get caught. We need to let them know when you get caught, you will not only get your assets confiscated, you will do long sentences, and we need to show that message to the community and to the people out there that the long arm of the police is not too far away.
Absolutely. I mean, and in particular for ruthless producers, suppliers and dealers of drugs who are intent on causing misery and harm and exploiting often vulnerable people via criminal exploitation. Plainly, they need to be held to account via the criminal justice system. Yeah,
absolutely. We've got about 10 minutes left, Simon. Unfortunately, because the conversation and so many points are coming through, I've not had a chance to read them through yet, but I will do right at the end. The other one I'm going to come to was one of your pledges was to get 450 new police appointed. I want to know how that's going in terms of meeting your target, but also the point that you made about earlier to making sure that there are a broad section of the local demographics that make up the region that is a fantastic West Midlands, and also appointed, but also to make sure the ones that are already in there that they are retained and also appointed to a senior level as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's not just recruitment that is important. It's about career progression and retention, because there's no point simply recruiting members of the Black, Asian, minority ethnic community into the police service if they don't have opportunities to progress in terms of their career, and that they remain in the police service, of course, because if they leave after 2 or 3 years, then of course that's not really achieved the end that we wanted. In terms of getting better representation, I mean, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I have committed to aiming to fulfil the target that my predecessor David Jameson set around that. So, and I'll just repeat that to people for the sake of clarity. So that target is that we're currently into year 2 of a national police uplift at the moment. That will operate between 2020 and 2023.
Yeah.
And we're aiming to have a net increase in police officers of 1,200. Okay, between those 3 years. And in order to get that net uplift, because obviously people are retiring or leaving and so on, in order to get that net uplift, we need to recruit about 2,800 officers. So the pledge is that of those 2,800 officers, West Midlands Police will aim to recruit 1,000 of those officers from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And that way it will improve the level of representation of Black, Asian, minority ethnic police officers within West Midlands Police Service. And that's a target that I'm committed to wanting to deliver within that timescale. Okay, because as I've said before, I do think it's important because it's partly important because we say in this country, don't we, that we police by consent.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's a fundamental principle that if we police by consent, we have a police service that is representative of the communities that it serves. In terms of my pledge around increasing the number of police officers allocated to the community policing, so my pledge was that of those 1,200 police officers, that net increase between 2020 and 2023, of those 1,200, I wanted 450 of those officers allocated to community policing because, as I've said before, I do think that police officers allocated to community policing really can provide that preventative, problem-solving, visible policing that people and communities really want. I can't give you any numbers as to where we are in terms of that head count at the moment. It is something that's a work in progress, but I do want to make sure that of those 1,200, by 2023, we've got 450 allocated to community policing.
Yeah, and I think that word that you use, visible, is very important, really, because at the moment, the only times when we do see a sort of a police vehicle or a police person is when they are sort of driving by, or when they're too busy trying to catch us speeding. And I think people want them just to, as we suggested to you, just walk down the high street and get to know the traditional sort of police on the beat, really. And I think, I know austerity has, by the Tory government, has really decimated our police force, and they've now tried to address that, but it won't be to the level how it was.
Well, no, because of course in the West Midlands, as many of your listeners will know, between 2010 and 2018, we lost 2,221 police officers. That was 25% of our police officers in the West Midlands. And as a result of the national uplift, we're only going to get 1,200 back. We lost 2,221. We're only get 1,200 back. It's welcome, but it's as I say, there's no levelling up in the West Midlands when it comes to our police officers. And of course, as a consequence of that, in 2010 we had about 1,800 police officers allocated to community policing. By 2018 there were only about 700. So again, we lost over 50% of those police officers who were previously allocated to community policing, and I do think that was a big mistake. I think it was counterproductive. I think it was a false economy, and I think the people and communities of the West Midlands, have been paying the price in terms of rising crime and less justice, safety and security for people in the West Midlands.
Well said, Simon. Just conscious of time now, so maybe just sort of a bit more sort of short, sharp sort of answers, really. Thoughts on sort of stop and search, good thing or a bad thing?
Stop and search has a role to play in relation to, in particular, taking violent weapons off the street. I do think that's where the focus of stop and search should be. It should be focused on violent crime and violent weapons and getting those off the street. That's where the focus should be. However, it can be counterproductive. We do need to make sure we get it right. We do need to make sure that the police are applying the law properly. We do need to make sure that the police are accountable and transparent and acting lawfully when they undertake stop and search, and that they're doing it courteously and in a way that is respectful and in a way that promotes trust and confidence within communities and doesn't undermine it.
Absolutely, I agree with you. There's certainly a place for it. It's got to be intelligence led. It has to be done with courtesy and respect, and give them a reason as to why they are doing it. And most importantly, now that every police officer have got those body cameras, haven't they? And that's a useful piece.
I do think that the availability of that technology has definitely promoted accountability. not only, I think it's been a good thing not only from the point of view of members of the public, but I think it's been a good thing from the point of view of the police as well.
Catalytic converters, Simon.
Right.
That seems to be a real bee in the bonnet with a lot of people. I've seen, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, this seems to be coming back again after maybe about 6-7 months away. It went a bit quiet now.
Yeah.
But within about 2 minutes, they are able to, take these catalytic converters off, and they're apparently worth about £500-600. But what is more distressing for me now is there's 2 or 3 of them, and there's one person there with a baseball bat. So if anyone does come out, they're not going to just run away now. They'll confront them and make sure they've got what they got. So what can is that at your level? Is that something that you can do, or is that something that you can maybe pass on to the local police to sort of be aware, or maybe do some preventative measures? I don't know, but I think it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of possible answers to that. Again, like all these things, in and of themselves, there's no one single answer or solution to these issues. What I would say is that and people may well have done this. If you go onto the internet, there is some sound advice there from various motoring agencies about the precautions you can take in order to at least hopefully prevent or minimise the risk of having your catalytic converter stolen. So I would advise people to go onto the internet, have a look at that advice, and if they're able to apply it, then please do so, because it can make a difference. Secondly, there is grant money available at the moment via the Safer Streets funding. Which is around about promoting the availability of CCTV and about improving street lighting, which plainly can have a contribution to prevention as well. But thirdly, again, I come back to community policing. It's about that essential intelligence that local police officers can glean in a way that they can't when, as you quite rightly say, they're driving past in a car at 30 or 40 miles an hour at speed in some pursuit, when people can't have an opportunity of building those relationships and communicating that level of intelligence, which can, of course, quite often lead to the apprehension of individuals, because quite often there is someone in the community who knows what's going on.
Absolutely.
And if you've got that local intelligence and trust and confidence, you've got an increased likelihood of being able to apprehend those people.
50% of all hate crime is against Muslims. Islamophobia is on the rise. People are worried, especially on social media. Is that a concern for you as well? Do you share some of the people, especially now with ladies wearing the hijab as well? Thoughts?
Yeah, no, really serious concern. Hate crime is despicable. There's absolutely no place for it in the West Midlands, of whatever description. We need to make sure that we are facilitating and encouraging people to report hate crime, because we know that hate crime is often underreported for lots of different reasons. I'm a big fan of third-party reporting centres, because I do think that people often will have the trust and confidence to report hate crime via those third-party reporting centres that are quite often embedded in communities. And people might have more trust and confidence in them than they might in their local police for various reasons, particularly when they're reporting issues that are of particular personal sensitive nature. That's really important. We need to make sure that the police are treating hate crime seriously, and that those people who are perpetrators of hate crime are being held to account by the criminal justice system, and that hate crime is being recorded so that we know the data, and we can therefore make sure that we're attributing or allocating the correct level of resource to it. And then thirdly, I would just say, because of the often devastating nature of what it's like being a victim of hate crime, really important we have the right victim support services in place so that people can access the right support at the right time if they're victims of hate crime. And again, it comes back to prevention as well. We need to make sure that we're engaging in the prevention of hate crime, because, as I always say, of whatever nature of crime, the prevention of crime is always better than having to deal with the consequence of crime. And part of that, again, comes back to education, of course.
Absolutely. We've come to the end of the show, Simon. I am going to just read out some of the comments just to give you a flavour of what sort of stuff is coming through at the moment. What's Simon's views on the crisis of Palestine? Feelings have been running high. I don't think that's part of his remit. Does Simon have any funding that he can tap into to provide much needed resources for our young people, such as dedicated football pitch and youth centres? I think there is a small pot that Simon is able to sort of share with us through the Police Crime Commissioner, and I know Jazz previously has benefited from that. So that's something that we're sort of looking forward to in due course. We need to invest in our young people. They are our future. Yeah. Who is paying for extra policing bill for the Commonwealth Games in 2022? Council, taxpayers, or central government? Quick answer if you can.
I think it's primarily being funded by central government.
Yeah. Okay. How will Simon be able to persuade the Tory government to give extra funding to the West Midlands? These are really tough questions now. Unfortunately, I'm just going to read them out so at least Simon is aware of them rather than maybe asking him to answer these.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Does Simon has...
Maybe I could address that in more detail on a future occasion.
Yeah, absolutely. We will at some point, maybe in September.
It's a matter about which I feel very strongly, but we won't.
No. Does Simon have any say in the closure of police stations? Can he overrule the chief constable? Islam Mukhtarim. Body cameras to what happens when they get on duty. Give feedback to the sergeant. Okay. Get funding for more cameras to catch criminals. Cameras on post. The only thing that I'm going to sort of touch on is last posted. I know Liam did say that he was going to have one youth worker per area. Unfortunately, Liam wasn't able. That's something that you can maybe pick up in Liam's absence, shall we say?
that is a very good point, Mr. Ali. I mean, you're right. In one sense, Liam and I had kind of two key campaign commitments. Mine was around community policing, and one of Liam's was around putting youth workers and youth services, rebuilding youth services around the West Midlands, putting youth workers back in neighbourhoods. I mean, sadly, Liam was unsuccessful in the election. Obviously, I wish he had been successful, because then he and I would have been having a conversation now in the last few weeks about what we're going to do to improve youth services. I have had a meeting with Andy Street. I had that meeting with him 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks ago. We have drawn up a preliminary work plan around those issues that we can work together for the benefit of the people in the West Midlands. I did put to him whether he might be interested in picking up Liam Byrne's pledge around youth services. And whether he would be prepared to commit, as Liam had done, to put youth workers back in neighbourhoods. I think it's fair to say he was not enthusiastic about adopting Liam's pledge around youth services. He was prepared to give a broader commitment around supporting young people. But I think his view was that youth service was rather more a kind of statutory obligation on the part of local authorities and central government. But we may well yet continue that conversation, Mr. Rowley.
No, thank you.
We will see.
We will back you on that, Simon. So, guys, that's end of my show. I hope you've enjoyed the honest and the frank and the passionate pledge by Simon to do everything he can to make sure that we are a much safer and more cohesive community moving forward. We will no doubt invite Simon once again more towards the end of the year just to see how things are, and obviously pass more comments on to yourself. Until next week, please continue to look after yourselves and each other. God bless. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.